O Merlin, in your crystal cave, deep in the diamond of the day, will there ever be a singer whose music will smooth the way, the furrow drawn by Adam's finger across the meadow and the wave? Or a runner who'll outrun man's long shadow driving on, burst through the gates of history and hang the apple on the tree? Will your sorcery ever show the sleeping bride shut in her bower, the day wreathed in its mound of snow, and time locked in his tower? I am an old man now, but then I was already past my prime when Arthur was crowned king. The years since then seem to me now more dim and faded than the earlier years, as if my life were a growing tree which burst to flower and leaf with him, and now has nothing more to do than yellow to the grave. But this is true of all old men, that the recent past is misted, while distant scenes of memory are clear and brightly coloured. Even the scenes of my far childhood come back to me now sharp and high-coloured and edged with brightness, like the pattern of a fruit tree against a white wall, or banners in sunlight against a sky of storm. The colours are brighter than they were, of that I am sure. The memories that come back to me here in the dark are seen with the new young eyes of childhood. They are so far gone from me, with their pain no longer present, that they unroll like pictures of something that happened not to me, not to the bubble of bone that this memory used to inhabit, but to another Merlin, as young and light and free of the air and spring winds as the bird she named me for. With the later memories it is different. They come back, some of them hot and shadowed, things seen in the fire, for this is whether I gather them. This is one of a few trivial tricks, I cannot call it power, left to me now that I am old and stripped at last down to man. I can still see, not clearly, or with the call of trumpets as I once did, but in the child's way of dreams and pictures in the fire. I can still make the flames burn up or die. It is one of the simplest of magics, the most easily learned, the last forgotten. When I cannot recall in dream, I see in the flames the red heart of the fire, or the countless mirrors of the crystal cave. The first memory of all is dark and fire-shot. But it is not my own memory, but later you will understand how I know of these things. You would call it not memory so much as a dream of the past, something in the blood, something recalled from him. While he still bore me in his body, it may be. I believe such things can be. So it seems to me right that I should start with him who was before me, and who will be again when I am gone. This is what happened that night. I saw it, and it is a true tale. It was dark, and the place was cold, but he had lit a small fire of wood which smoked sullenly, but gave a little warmth. It had been raining all day, and from the branches near the mouth of the cave water still dripped, and a steady trickle overflowed the lip of the well, soaking the ground below. Several times, restless, he had left the cave, and now he walked out below the cliff to the grove where his horse stood tethered. With the coming of dusk the rain had stopped, but a mist had risen. creeping knee-high through the trees so that they stood like ghosts, and the grazing horse floated like a swan. It was a grey, and more than ever ghostly, because it grazed so quietly. He had torn up a scarf and wound fragments of cloth round a bit so that no jingle could betray him. The bit was gilded, and the torn strips were of silk, for he was a king's son. If they had caught him, they would have killed him. He was just 18. He heard the hoofbeats coming softly up the valley, and his head moved, his breathing quickened. His sword flicked with light as he lifted it. The grey horse paused in its grazing and lifted its head clear of the mist. Its nostrils flickered, but no sound came. The man smiled. The hoofbeats came closer, and then, shoulder-deep in mist, a brown pony trotted out of the dusk. Its rider, small and slight, was wrapped in a dark cloak, muffled from the night air. The pony pulled to a halt, threw up its head, and gave a long, pealing whinny. The rider, with an exclamation of dismay, slipped from its back and grabbed for the bridle to muffle the sound against her cloak. She was a girl, very young, who looked round her anxiously until she saw the young man, sword in hand, at the edge of the trees. "You sound like a troop of cavalry." "I was here before I knew it. Everything looks so strange in the mist." "No one saw you? You came safely?" "Safely enough. It's been impossible the last 2 days. They were on the roads night and day." "I guessed it." He smiled. "Well, now you are here, give me the bridle." He led the pony in under the trees and tied it up. Then he kissed her. After a while, she pushed him away. "I ought not to stay. I brought the things, so even if I can't come tomorrow—" She stopped. She had seen the saddle on his horse, the muffled bit, the packed saddlebag. Her hands moved sharply against his chest, and his own covered them and held her fast. "Ah," she said, "I knew. I knew even in my sleep last night. You're going. I must, tonight." She was silent for a minute. Then all she said was, "How long?" He did not pretend to misunderstand her. "We have an hour, 2, no more," she said flatly. "You will come back." Then, as he started to speak, No, not now, not any more. We have said it all, and now there is no more time. I only meant that you will be safe, and you will come back safely. I tell you, I know these things. I have the sight. You will come back." "It hardly needs the sight to tell me that. I must come back. And then perhaps you will listen to me." "No." She stopped him again, almost angrily. "It doesn't matter." "What does it matter? We have only an hour. We are wasting it. Let us go in." He was already pulling out the jewelled pin that held her cloak together, as he put an arm round her and led her towards the cave. "Yes. Let us go in."
Presenting the Merlin Trilogy. The Crystal Cave by Mary Stuart. Book 1, The Dove. Read by Matthew Jones. The day my uncle Camlac came home, I was just 6 years old. I remember him well as I first saw him. A tall young man, fiery like my grandfather, with the blue eyes and reddish hair that I thought so beautiful in my mother. He came to Maradunham near sunset of a September evening, with a small troop of men. Being only small, I was with the women in the long old-fashioned room where they did the weaving. My mother was sitting at the loom. I remember the cloth. It was of scarlet, with a narrow pattern of green at the edge. I sat near her on the floor playing knucklebones, right hand against left. The sun slanted through the windows, making oblong pools of bright gold on the cracked mosaics of the floor. Bees droned in the herbs outside, and even the click and rattle of a loom sounded sleepy. The women were talking amongst themselves over their spindles, but softly, heads together, and Moravik, my nurse, was frankly asleep on her stool in one of the pools of sunlight. When the clatter and then the shouts came from the courtyard, the loom stopped abruptly. With it, the soft chatter of the women came to an end. Moravik came awake with a snort and a stare, and my mother was sitting very straight, head lifted, listening. She had dropped her shuttle. I saw her eyes meet Moravik's. I was halfway to the window when Moravik called to me sharply, and there was something in her voice that made me stop and go back to her without protest. She began to fuss with my clothing, pulling my tunic straight and smoothing my hair, so that I understood the visitor to be someone of importance. I felt excitement, and also surprise that apparently I was to be presented to him. I was used to being kept out of the way in those days. I stood patiently while Moravik dragged the comb through my hair and over my head. She and her mother exchanged some quick, breathless talk, which I, hardly heeding, did not understand. I was listening to the tramp of horses in the yard and the shouting of men, words here and there coming clearly in a language neither Welsh nor Latin, Celtic, with some accent like the one of Less Britain, which I understood because my nurse Moravik was a Breton, and her language came to me as readily as my own. I heard my grandfather's great laugh, and another voice replying. Then he must have swept the newcomer indoors with him, for the voices receded, leaving only the jingle and stamp of the horses being led to the stables. I broke from Moravik and ran to my mother. "Who is it?" "It is my brother Camlac, the king's son." She did not look at me, but pointed to the fallen shuttle. I picked it up and handed it to her. Slowly, and rather mechanically, she set the loom moving again. "Is the war over, then?" "The war has been over a long time. Your uncle has been with the High King in the south." "And now he's come home, because my Uncle David's died." David had been the heir, the king's eldest son. He had died suddenly and in great pain of cramps in the stomach. Ellen, his widow, who was childless, had gone back to her father. Naturally there had been the usual talk of poison, but nobody took that seriously. David had been well liked, a tough fighter, a careful man, but generous where it suited. "They say he'll have to marry. Will he, Mother?" I was excited, important at knowing so much, thinking of a wedding feast. "Will he marry Cerdwin, now that my Uncle David—" "What?" The shuttle stopped. She swung round, startled. But what she saw in my face appeased her, for the anger went from her voice, though she still frowned, and I heard Moravik clucking and fussing behind me. "Where in the world did you get that? You hear too much, whether you understand it or not. You forget such matters and hold your tongue." "Listen to me, Merlin," said my mother. "When they come to see you, you would do well to keep quiet. Do you understand me?" "Yes, Mother." I understood very well. I was accustomed to keeping out of the king's way. "But will they come to see me? Why me?" she said, with a thin bitterness that made her look all at once older, almost as old as Moravik. "Why do you think?" The loom clacked again, fiercely. She was feeding in the green thread. I could see she was making a mistake, but it looked pretty, so I said nothing, watching her, staying close, till at length the curtain at the doorway was pushed aside and the two men came in. They seemed to fill the room, the redhead and the grey, within a foot of the beams. My grandfather wore blue periwinkle colour with a gold border. Camlac was in black. Later I was to discover that he always wore black. He had jewels on his hands and at his shoulder, and beside his father he looked lightly built and young, but as sharp and whippy as a fox. My mother stood up. She was wearing a house robe of dark brown, the colour of peat, and against it her hair shone like corn silk. But neither of the two men glanced at her. You would have thought there was no one in the room but I, small as I was, by the loom. My grandfather jerked his head and said one word. "Out!" The women hurried in a rustling, silent group from the chamber. Moravik stood her ground, puffed up with bravery like a partridge. But the fierce blue eyes flicked to her for a second, and she went. A sniff as she passed was all she dared. The eyes came back to me. "Your sister's bastard," said the king. "There he is. 6 years old this month, grown like a weed, and no more like any of us than a damned devil's whelp would be. Look at him! Black hair, black eyes, as scared of cold iron as a changeling from the hollow hills. You tell me the devil himself got that one, and I would believe you." My uncle said only one word, straight to her. "Whose?" You think we didn't ask, you fool? She was whipped till the women said she'd miscarry. We never had a word from her. Better if she had, perhaps. Some nonsense they were talking, old wives' tales of devils coming in the dark to lie with young maids, and more. And from the look of him they could be right. Camlac, 6 foot and golden, looked down at me. His eyes were blue, clear as my mother's. His colour high. The mud and dried yellow on his soft doe-skin boots, and a smell of sweat and horses came from him. He had come to look at me before even taking the dirt of travel off. I remember how he stared down at me, while my mother stood silent, and my grandfather glowered under his brows, his breath coming harsh and rapid, as it always did when he put himself into a passion. "Come here," said my uncle. I took 6 steps forward. I didn't dare go nearer. I stopped. From 3 paces away he seemed taller than ever. He towered over me to the ceiling beams. "What's your name?" "Mervyn Emrys." "Emrys, child of light, belonging to the gods. That hardly seems the name for a devil's whelp." The mildness of his tone encouraged me. "They call me Merlinus. It's a Roman name for a falcon, the cowlach." "A falcon!" My grandfather made a sound of contempt, shooting his arm rings till they jingled. "Small one," I said defensively, then fell silent under my uncle's thoughtful look. He stroked his chin, then looked at my mother with his brows up. "Strange choices, all of them, for a Christian household. A Roman demon, perhaps, Ninian." "Perhaps? How do I know?" "It was dark." The king swept a hand down in a violent gesture. "You see, that's all we get. Lies and tales of sorcery, insolence. Get back to your work, girl. Keep your bastard out of my sight. Now that your brother's home, we'll find a man who will take you from here. Camlac, I hope you will see the sense of getting yourself a wife now, and a son or two, since this is all I am left with." "Oh, I am for it." Their attention had lifted from me. They were going. Neither touched me. I unclenched my hands and moved back softly 1/2 pace. Another. "But you have got yourself a new queen meantime, sir. They tell me she is pregnant." "Oh, no matter of that. You should be wed and soon. I am an old man. These are troubled times. As for this boy—" I froze again. "Forget him. Whoever sired him, if he hasn't come forward in 6 years, he's not going to do that now. And if he had been Vortigern's himself, the High King, he would have made nothing of him. A sullen brat who skulks alone in corners. Doesn't even play with the other boys. Afraid too, likely. Afraid of his own shadow." He turned away. Camlac's eyes met my mother's over my head. Some message passed. Then he looked down at me again and smiled. I still remember how the room seemed to light up, though the sun had gone now, and its warmth with it. Soon they would be bringing the rushlights. "Well, it's but a fledgling falcon after all. Don't be too hard on him, sir. You frightened better men than he is in your time." "Ha! Yourself, you mean?" "Ha! Oh, I assure you." The king in the doorway glared briefly at me under his jutting brows. Then, with a puff of impatient breath, settled his mantle over his arm. Well, let it be. God's sweet death, I'm hungry. It's well past supper time, but I suppose you'll want to go and soak yourself first in your damned Roman fashion. I warn you, we have never had the furnaces on since you left." He turned with a swirl of the blue cloak and went out, still talking. Behind me I heard my mother's breath go out, and the rustle of her gown as she sat. My uncle put a hand to me. "Come, Merlinus, talk to me while I bathe in your cold Welsh water. We princes must get to know one another." I stood rooted. I was conscious of my mother's silence, and how still she sat. "Come," said my uncle gently, and smiled at me again. I ran to him. I went through the Hypocaust that night. This was my private way, my secret hiding place, where I could escape from the bigger boys and play my own solitary games. My grandfather had been right when he said I skulked alone in corners. But this was not for fear, though the sons of his nobles followed his lead, as children do, and made me the butt in their rough war games whenever they could catch me. At the beginning, it is true, the tunnels of the disused heating system were a refuge, a secret place where I could hide and be alone. But I soon found a curiously strong pleasure in exploring the great system of dark, earth-smelling chambers under the palace floors. My grandfather's palace had in times past been a vast country house belonging to some Roman notable who had owned and farmed the land for several miles each way along the river valley. The main part of the house still stood, though badly scarred by time and war, and by at least one disastrous fire which had destroyed one end of the main block and part of a wing. The old slaves' quarters were still intact round the courtyard, where the cooks and house servants worked, and the bath-house remained, though patched and plastered, and with the roof rough thatched over the worst bits. I never remember the furnace working. The waters were heated over the courtyard fires, and the entrance to my secret labyrinth was the stoke-hole in the boiler-house. This was a trap in the wall under the cracked and rusting boiler, barely the height of a grown man's knee, and hidden by docks and nettles and a huge curved metal shard fallen from the boiler itself. Once inside, you could get under the rooms of the bath-house, but this had been out of use for so long that the space under the floors was too cluttered and foul even for me. I went the other way, under the main block of the palace. Here the old hot air system had been so well built and maintained that even now the knee-high space under the floors was dry and airy, and the plaster still clung to the brick pillars that held up the floors. In places, of course, a pillar had collapsed or debris had fallen, but the traps which led from one room to another were solidly arched and safe, and I was free to crawl, unseen and unheard, even as far as the king's own chamber. If they had ever discovered me, I think I might have received a worse punishment than whipping. I must have listened, innocently enough, to dozens of secret councils, and certainly to some very private goings-on, but that side of it never occurred to me. It was natural enough that nobody should give thought to the dangers of eavesdropping. In the old days the flues had been cleaned by slave boys. Nobody much beyond the age of 10 could ever have got through some of those workings. There were one or two places where even I was hard pushed to wriggle through. I was only once in danger of discovery, one afternoon when Moravik supposed I was playing with the boys, and they in turn thought I was safe under her skirts. The red-haired Dinius, my chief tormentor, gave a younger boy such a shove from the roof-tree where they were playing that the latter fell and broke his leg. It set up such a howling that Moravik, running to the scene, discovered me absent and set the palace by the ears. I heard the noise and emerged, breathless and dirty, from under the boiler just as she started a hunt through the bath-house wing. I lied my way out of it, and got off with boxed ears and a scolding, but it was a warning. I never went into the Hypocaust again by daylight, only at night before Moravik came to bed, or once or twice when I was wakeful and she was already abed snoring. Most of the palace would be abed too, but when there was a feast, or when my grandfather had guests, I would listen to the noise of voices and the singing, and sometimes I would creep as far as my mother's chamber to hear the sound of her voice as she talked with her women. One night I heard her praying aloud, as one does sometimes when alone, and in the prayer was my name, Emrys, and then her tears. After that I went another way, past the Queen's rooms, where almost every evening Olwen, the young Queen, sang to her harp among her ladies until the King's tread came heavily down the corridor and the music stopped. But it was for none of these things that I went. What mattered to me, I see it clearly now, was to be alone in the secret dark, where a man is his own master, except for death. Mostly I went to what I called my cave. This had been part of some main chimney shaft, and the top of it had crumbled, so one could see the sky. It held a magic for me, since the day I had looked up at midday and seen, faint but unmistakable, a star. Now, when I was in bed at night, I would curl up on my bed of stolen stable straw and watch the stars wheeling slowly across, and make my own bet with heaven, which was, if the moon should show over the shaft while I was there, the next day would bring me my heart's desire. The moon was there that night. Full and shining she stood, clear in the centre of the shaft, a light pouring down on my upturned face, so white and pure that it seemed I drank it in like water. I did not move till she had gone, and the little star that dogs her. On the way back I passed under a room that had been empty before, but which now held voices. Camlach's room, of course. He and another man whose name I did not know, but who from his accent was one of those who had ridden in that day. I had found that they came from Cornwall. He had one of those thick, rumbling voices, of which I caught only a word here and there as I crawled quickly through, worming my way between the pillars, concerned only not to be heard. I was right at the end wall, and feeling along it for the arched gap to the next chamber, when my shoulder struck a broken section of flue pipe, and a loose piece of fireclay fell with a rattle. A Cornishman's voice stopped abruptly. "What's that?" Then my uncle's voice, so clear down the broken flue that you could have thought he spoke in my ear. "Nothing. A rat. It came from under the floor. I tell you the place is falling to pieces." There was the sound of a chair scraping back, footsteps going across the room, away from me. His voice receded. I thought I heard the clink and gurgle of a drink being poured. I began, slowly, to edge along the wall towards the trap. He was coming back. "And even if she does refuse him, it will hardly matter. She won't stay here. At any rate, no longer than my father can fight the bishop off and keep her by him. I tell you, with her mind set on what she calls a higher court, I have nothing to fear, not even if he came himself." "As long as you believe her." "Oh, I believe her. I've been asking here and there, and everyone says the same. Who knows, we might be thankful yet to have a voice at that heavenly court of hers before the game is played out. She's devout enough to save the lot of us, they tell me, if she'll only put her mind to it. Yeah, you may need it yet." "I may. And the boy?" "The boy?" My uncle paused. The soft footsteps resumed their pacing. I strained to hear. I had to hear. Why it should have mattered I hardly knew. It did not worry me overmuch to be called bastard or coward or devil's whelp, but tonight there had been that full moon. He turned. His voice carried clearly, carelessly, indulgent even. "Ah, yes, the boy. A clever child at a guess, with more there than they give him credit for, and nice enough if one speaks him fair. I shall keep him close to me. Remember that, Alan. I like the boy." He called a servant in then to replenish the wine jug, and under cover of this I crept away. That was the beginning of it. For days I followed him everywhere, and he tolerated, even encouraged me, and it never occurred to me that a man of 21 would not always welcome a puppy of 6 forever trotting at his heels. Moravik scolded when she could get hold of me, but my mother seemed pleased and relieved, and bade her let me be. It had been a hot summer, and there was peace that year, so for the first few days of his homecoming Camlac idled, resting, or riding out with his father or the men through the harvest fields and the valleys where the apples already dropped ripe from the trees. South Wales is a lovely country, with green hills and deep valleys, flat water meadows yellow with flowers, where cattle grow sleek, oak forests full of deer, and the high blue uplands, where the cuckoo shouts in springtime, and where, come winter, the wolves run. And I have seen lightning even with the snow. Maladunham lies where the estuary opens to the sea, on the river which is marked Torbius on the military maps, but which the Welsh called Twy. Here the valley is flat and wide, and the Twy runs in a deep and placid meander through bog and water meadow between the gentle hills. The town stands on the rising ground of the north bank, where the land is drained and dry. It is served inland by the military road from Caerleon, and from the south by a good stone bridge with 3 spans, from which a paved street leads straight uphill past the king's house and into the square. Apart from my grandfather's house and the barrack buildings of a Roman-built fortress where he quartered his soldiers and which he kept in good repair, the best building in Maradunham was the Christian nunnery near the palace on the river's bank. A few holy women lived there, calling themselves the Community of St. Peter, though most of the townspeople called the place Termyrddin, from the old shrine of the god, which had stood time out of mind under an oak not far from St. Peter's Gate. Even when I was a child I heard the town itself called Caermyrddin. It is not true, as they say now, that men call it after me. The fact is that I, like the town and the hill behind it with the sacred spring, was called after the god who is worshipped in high places. Since the events which I shall tell of, the name of the town has been publicly changed in my honour, but the god was there first, and if I have his hill now it is because he shares it with me. My grandfather's house was set amongst its orchards, right beside the river. If you climbed, by way of a leaning apple tree, to the top of a wall, you could sit high above the towpath and watch the river bridge for people riding in from the south, or from the ships that came up with the tide. Though I was not allowed to climb the trees for apples, being forced to content myself with the windfalls, Moravik never stopped me from climbing to the top of a wall. To have me posted there as sentry meant she got wind of new arrivals sooner than anyone else in the place. There was a little raised terrace at the orchard's end, with a curved brick wall at the back, and a stone seat protected from the wind. She would sit there, hour by hour, dozing over her spindle, while the sun beat into the corner so hotly that lizards would steal out to lie on the stones, and I called out my reports from the wall. One hot afternoon, about 8 days after Camlac's coming to Maradunham, I was at my post as usual. There was no coming and going on the bridge or the road up the valley, only a local grain barge loading at the wharf, watched by a scatter of idlers and an old man in a hooded cloak who loitered, picking up windfalls along the wall. I looked over my shoulder towards Moravik's corner. She was asleep, her spindle dropping on her knee. She looked, with a white fluffy wool, like a burst bulrush. I threw down the bitten windfall I had been eating, and tilted my head to study the forbidden tree-top boughs, where yellow globes hung clustered against the sky. There was one I thought I could reach. The fruit was round and glossy, ripening almost visibly in the hot sun. My mouth watered. I reached for a foothold, and began to climb. I was 2 branches away from the fruit, when a shout from the direction of the bridge, followed by the quick tramp of hoofs and the jingle of metal, brought me up short. Clinging like a monkey, I made sure of my feet, then reached with one hand to push the leaves aside, peering down towards the bridge. A troop of men was riding over it towards the town. One man rode alone in front, bareheaded, on a big brown horse. Not Camlac or my grandfather, and not one of the nobles, for the men wore colours I did not know. Then, as they reached the nearer end of the bridge, I saw that the leader was a stranger, black-haired and black-bearded, with a foreign-looking set to his clothes, a flash of gold at his breast. His wrist-guards were golden too, and a span deep. His troop, as I judged, was about 50 strong. King Gorlan of Lanascol. Where the name sprang from? Clear beyond mistake. I had no idea. Something heard from my labyrinth, perhaps, a word spoken carelessly in a child's hearing, a dream even. The shields and spear tips catching the sun flashed into my eyes, and Gorlan of Lanascol, king, come to marry my mother, and take me with him overseas. She would be a queen, and I— Oh, he was already setting his horse at the hill. I began to half slither, half scramble down the tree. And if she refuses him— I recognized that voice. It was the Cornishman's, and after him came my uncle's. Even if she does, it will hardly matter. I have nothing to fear, so even if he came himself— Yes, those words I'd heard last night. The troop was riding at ease across the bridge. The jingle of arms and the hammering of hoofs, they rang in the still sunlight. He had come himself. He was here. A foot above the wall top I missed my footing and almost fell. Luckily my grip held, and I slithered safely to my coping in a shower of leaves and lichen, just as my nurse's voice called shrilly, "Merlin, Merlin, save us, where is the boy?" Here, Moravik, just coming down." I landed in the long grass. She'd left her spindle, and kilting up her skirts she came running. "What's it to do on the river road? I have heard horses, a whole troop by the noise." "Saints alive, child, look at your clothes! If I didn't mend that tunic only this week now, look at it! A tear you could put a fist through, and dirt from head to foot like a beggar's brat." I dodged as she reached for me. "I fell. Sorry. I was climbing down to tell you. It's a troop of horse foreigners. Moravik, it's King Gorlan from Lanascol. He's got a big red cloak and a black beard. Gorlan of Lanascol? Oh, that is barely 20 miles from where I was born." "What is he here for, I wonder?" "Didn't you know? He's come to marry my mother." "Nonsense! It's true. Of course it is not true. Do you think I would not know?" "You must not say these things, Merlin. It could mean trouble. Where did you get it?" "Don't remember. Someone told me. My mother, I think." "That is not true, and you know it. Then I must have heard something. Heard something. Young pigs have long ears." "Yours must be forever to the ground, you hear so much." "Oh, what are you smiling at? Nothing." She set her hands on her hips. "You've been listening to things you should not. I have told you about this before. No wonder people say what they say." I usually gave up and edged away from dangerous ground, but excitement made me reckless. "It's true. You'll find it's true. Does it matter where I heard it? I really can't remember now, but I know it's true. Moravik, what? King Gorlan. He's my father, my real father." "What?" This time the syllable was edged. "Didn't you know? Not even you?" "No, I did not, and no more do you." "And if you so much as breathe this to anyone—" "How do you know the name even?" She took me by the shoulders and gave me a sharp little shake. "How do you even know this is King Gorlan? There has been nothing said of his coming, even to me." "I told you. I don't remember what I heard or where. I just heard his name somewhere, that's all. I know he's coming to see the king about my mother. We'll go to Les Britain, Moravik. You can come with us. You'll like it, won't you? It's your home. Perhaps we'll be near—" Her grip tightened, and I stopped. With relief I saw one of the king's body servants hurrying up towards us through the apple trees. He's to go before the king now, the boy in the great hall." "Hurry! Who is it?" The king said to Harry, I've been looking everywhere for that boy. Who is it? It's King Gorlan from Brittany. So, what is his business with the boy? Well, how do I know? Look, it's a hot day, and I've been running. I've wasted time. Get the boy there. When Lady Ninian is sent for, and the boy. There'll be a beating for someone by my reckoning if he's not there by the time King's looking round for him. He's been in a rare taking since those outriders came, I can tell you. All right. Get back safe that we will be there in a few minutes. All the sweet saints in heaven! Morvick had the biggest collection of charms and talismans of anyone in Maradunham. I have never known her pass a wayside shrine without paying her respects to whatever image inhabited it. But officially she was a Christian, and, when in trouble, a devout one. Sweet cherubim! The child has to choose this afternoon to be in rags. Hurry now, or there will be trouble for both of us. She hustled me up the path towards the house, busily calling on her saints and exhorting me to hurry, determinedly refusing even to comment on the fact that I had been right about the newcomer. Dear St. Peter, why did I eat those eels for dinner and then sleep so sound? Today of all days. Here! She pushed me in front of her into my room. Get out of those rags and into your good tunic. You will know soon enough what the Lord has sent for you. Hurry, child! The room I shared with Morvick was a small one, dark, and next to the servants' quarters. It always smelt of cooking smells from the kitchen, but I liked this, as I liked the old lichened pear tree that hung close outside the window, where the birds swung singing in the summer mornings. My bed stood right under this window. The bed was nothing but plain planks set across wooden blocks. No carving, not even a head or footboard. I had heard Morvick grumble to the other servants when she thought I wasn't listening, but it was hardly a fit place to house a king's grandson. But to me she said merely that it was inconvenient for her to be near the other servants, and indeed I was comfortable enough, for she saw to it I had clean straw and a coverlet of wool, every bit as good as those on my mother's bed in the big room next to my grandfather. Morvick herself had a pallet on the floor near the door, and this was sometimes shared by the big wolf-hound who fidgeted and scratched for fleas beside her feet, and sometimes by Cerdic, one of the grooms, a Saxon who had been taken in a raid long since, and had settled down to marry one of the local girls. She had died in childbed a year later, and the child with her, but he stayed on, apparently quite content. I once asked Morvick why she allowed the dog to sleep in the room when she grumbled so much about the smell and the fleas. I forget what she answered, but I knew without being told. He was there to give warning if anyone came into the room during the night. Cerdic, of course, was the exception. The dog accepted him with no more fuss than the beating of his tail upon the floor, and vacated the bed for him. In a way, I suppose Cerdic fulfilled the same function as the watchdog, and others besides. Morvick never mentioned him, and neither did I. A small child is supposed to sleep very soundly. But even then, young as I was, I would wake sometimes in the middle of the night, and lie quite still, watching the stars through the window beside me, caught like sparkling silverfish in the net of the pear-tree's boughs. What passed between Cerdic and Morvick meant no more to me than that he helped to guard my nights, as she my days. My clothes were kept in a wooden chest which stood against the wall. This was very old, with panels painted with scenes of gods and goddesses, and I think originally it had come from Rome itself. Now the paint was dirty and rubbed and flaking, but still on the lid you could see, like shadows, a scene taking place in what looked like a cave. There was a bull, and a man with a knife, and someone holding a sheaf of corn, and over in the corner some figure, rubbed almost away, with rays round his head like the sun, and a stick in his hand. The chest was lined with cedar wood, and Morvick washed my clothes herself, and laid them away with sweet herbs from the garden. She threw the lid up now, so roughly that it banged against the wall, and pulled out the better of my two good tunics, the green one with the scarlet border. She shouted for water, and one of the maids brought it running, and was scolded for spilling it on the floor. The fat servant came panting again to tell us that we should hurry, and got snapped at for his pains. But in a very short time I was hustled once more along the colonnade and through the big arched doorway into the main part of the house. The hall where the king received visitors was a long, high room, with a floor of black and white stone, framing a mosaic of a god with a leopard. This had been badly scarred and broken by the dragging of heavy furniture and the constant passing of booted feet. One side of the room was open to the colonnade, and here in winter a fire was kindled on the bare floor, within a loose frame of stones. The floor and pillars near it were blackened with the smoke. At the far end of the room stood the dais with my grandfather's big chair, and beside it the smaller one for his queen. He was sitting there now, with Camlac standing on his right, and his wife Olwen seated at his left. She was his third wife, and younger than my mother, a dark, silent, rather stupid girl, with a skin like new milk and braids down to her knee. She could sing like a bird, and do fine needlework, but very little else. My mother, I think, both liked and despised her. At any rate, against all expectations, they got along tolerably well together, and I had heard Moravik say that life for my mother had been a great deal easier since the king's second wife, Gwyneth, had died a year ago, and within the month Olwen had taken her place in the king's bed. Even if Olwen had cuffed me and sneered at me as Gwyneth had done, I should have liked her for her music. But she was always kind to me in her vague, placid way, and when the king was out of the way, had taught me my notes, and even let me use her harp till I could play after a fashion. I had a feeling for it, she said, but we both knew what the king would say to such folly, so her kindness was secret, even from my mother. She did not notice me now. Nobody did except my cousin Dinius, who stood by Olwen's chair on the dais. Dinius was a bastard of my grandfather's by a slave woman. He was a big boy of 7, with his father's red hair and high temper. He was strong for his age, and quite fearless, and had enjoyed the king's favour since the day he had, at the age of 5, stolen a ride on one of his father's horses, a wild brown colt that had bolted with him through the town, and only got rid of him when he rode it straight at Breast-High Bank. His father had thrashed him with his own hands, and afterwards given him a dagger with a gilded hilt. Dinius claimed the title of prince, at any rate among the rest of the children, from that moment onwards, and treated his fellow bastard, myself, with the utmost contempt. He stared at me now as expressionless as a stone, but his left hand, the one away from his father, made a rude sign, and then chopped silently, expressively, downwards. I had paused in the doorway, and behind me my nurse's hand twitched my tunic into place, and then gave me a push between the shoulder blades. "Go on now, straighten your back. He won't eat you." As if to give the lie to this, I heard the click of charms and the start of another muttered prayer. The room was full of people. Many of them I knew, but there were strangers there who might be the party I'd seen ride in. Their leader sat near the king, surrounded by his own men. He was the big dark man I had seen on the bridge, full-bearded, with a fierce beak of a nose and thick limbs shrouded in a scarlet cloak. On the king's other side, but standing below the dais, was my mother, with 2 of her women. I loved to see her as she was now, dressed like a princess, her long robe of creamy wool hanging straight to the floor, as if carved of new wood. Her hair was unbraided, and fell down her back like rain. She had a blue mantle with a copper clasp. Her face was colourless and very still. I was so busy with my own fears, the gesture from Dinius, the averted face and downcast eyes of my mother, the silence of the people, and the empty middle of the floor over which I must walk, that I had not even looked at my grandfather. I took a step forward, still unnoticed, when suddenly, with a crash like a horse-kicking, he slammed both hands down on the wooden arms of his chair, and thrust himself to his feet so violently that the heavy chair went back a pace, its feet scalding the oak planks of the platform. "By the light!" His face was mottled scarlet, and the reddish brows jutted in knots of flesh above his furious little blue eyes. He glared down at my mother, and drew a breath to speak that could be heard clear to the door where I had paused, afraid. Then the bearded man, who had risen with him, said something in an accent I could not catch, and at the same moment Camlac touched his arm, whispering. The king paused. "As you will. Later. Get them out of here." Then, clearly, to my mother, "This is not the end of it, Ninian. I promise you. 6 years! It is enough, by God! Come, my lord." He swept his cloak up over one arm, jerked his head to his son, and stepping down from the dais, took the bearded man by the arm, and strode with him to the door. After him, meek as milk, trailed his wife Olwen with her women, and after that Dinius, smiling. My mother never moved. The king went by her without a word or a look, and the crowd parted between him and the door like a stubble-field under the share. It left me standing alone, rooted and staring, 3 paces in from the door. As the king bore down on me, I came to myself and turned to escape into the anteroom, but I was not quick enough. He stopped abruptly. Releasing Gorlan's arm, he swung round on me. The blue cloak swirled, and a corner of the cloth caught my eye. It brought tears to it. I blinked up at him. Gorlan had paused beside him. He was younger than my uncle, David, had been. He was angry, too, but he was hiding it, and the anger was not for me. He looked surprised when the king stopped, and said, "Who is this?" "This is her son, what your grace would have given a name to," said my grandfather, and the gold flashed on his armlet as he swung his big hand up and knocked me flat on the floor as easily as a boy would flatten a fly. Then the blue cloak swept by, and the king's booted feet, and Gorlan's after him with hardly a pause. Olwen said something in her pretty voice and stooped over me, but the king called to her angrily, and her hand withdrew, and she hurried after him with the rest. I picked myself up from the floor and looked round for Moravik, but she was not there. She had gone straight to my mother, and had not even seen. I began to push my way towards them through the hubbub of the hall. Before I could reach my mother, the women, in a tight and silent group round her, left the hall by the other door. None of them looked back. Someone spoke to me, but I did not answer. I ran out to the colonnade, across the main court, and out again into the quiet sunlight of the orchard. My uncle found me on Moravik's terrace. I was lying on my belly on the hot flagstones, watching a lizard. Of all that day, this is my most vivid recollection. The lizard, flat on the hot stone, within a foot of my face, its body still as green bronze, but for the pulsing throat. It had small, dark eyes, no brighter than slate, and the inside of its mouth was the colour of melons. It had a long, sharp tongue, which flicked out quick as a whip, and its feet made a tiny rustling noise on the stone as it ran across from one side to the other. I turned my head. The lizard disappeared down a crack in the flags. My uncle Camlac was coming down through the orchard. He mounted the 3 shallow steps to the terrace, soft-footed in his elegant laced sandals, and stood looking down. I looked away. The moss between the stones had tiny white flowers, no bigger than the lizard's eyes, each one as perfect as a carved cup. To this day I remember the design on them, as well as if I had carved it myself.
"Let me see," he said. I didn't move. He crossed to the stone bench and sat down facing me, knees apart, clasped hands between them. "Look at me, Merlin." I obeyed him. He studied me in silence for a while. "I'm always being told that you will not play rough games, that you run away from Dinius, that you will never make a soldier, or even a man. Yet, when the king strikes you down with a blow that would have sent one of his deer-hounds yelping to kennel, you made no sound and shed no tear." I said nothing. "I think perhaps you are not quite what they deem you, Merlin." Still nothing. "Do you know why Gorlan came today?" I thought it better to lie. "No. He came to ask for your mother's hand. If she had consented, you would have gone with him to Brittany." I touched one of the moss cups with a forefinger. It crumbled like a puffball and vanished. Experimentally, I touched another. Camlac said more sharply than he usually spoke to me, "Are you listening?"
"Yes, but if she's refused him, it's hardly going to matter. Will it?"
"You mean you don't want to go?"
"I would have thought—"
He knitted the fair brows, so like my grandfather's.
"You would be treated honourably, and to be a prince. I'm a prince now, as much a prince as I can ever be."
"What do you mean by that?"
"Well, if she's refused him, he can't be my father. I thought he was. I thought that was why he'd come."
"What made you think so?"
"I don't know. It seemed—"
I stopped. I could not explain to Camlac about the flash of light in which Gorlan's name had come to me.
"I just thought he must be."
"Only because you have been waiting for him all this time." "Such waiting is foolish, Merlin. It is time you faced the truth. Your father is dead." I put my hand down on the tuft of moss, crushing it. I watched the flash of the fingers whiten with the pressure.
"She told you that?"
"No." He lifted his shoulders. "But had he been still alive, he would have been here long since. You must know that." I was silent. "And if he is not dead, and still has never come, it can surely not be a matter for great grief on anyone's part."
"No, except that however base he may be, it might have saved my mother something, and me."
As I moved my hand, the moss slowly unfurled again, as if growing, but the tiny flowers had gone. My uncle nodded. "She would have been wiser, perhaps, to have accepted Gorlan, or some other prince."
"What will happen to us?"
I asked. "Your mother wants to go into St. Peter's, and well, you are quick and clever. I am told you can read a little. You could be a priest."
"No!"
His brows came down again, over the thin-bridged nose. "It is a good enough life. You are not warrior stock, that is certain. Why not take a life that will suit you, and where you will be safe?"
"I don't need to be a warrior to want to be free. To be shut up in a place like St. Peter's, that's not the way."
I broke off. I knew I had spoken hotly, but I found the words failing me. I could not explain something I did not know myself. I looked up eagerly.
"I'll stay with you. If you cannot use me, I'll run away to serve some other prince. But I would rather stay with you."
"Well, it is early yet to speak of things like that. You're very young." He got to his feet. "Does your face hurt you?"
"No."
"You should have it seen to. Come with me now." He put out a hand, and I went with him. He led me up through the orchard, then in through the arch that led to my grandfather's private garden. I hung back against his hand.
"I'm not allowed in there."
"Surely with me? Your grandfather is with his guests, and he will not see you. Come along. I have got something better for you than your windfall apples. They've been gathering the apricots, and I saved the best aside out of the baskets as I came down." He trod forward, with that graceful cat's stride of his, through the bergamot and lavender, to where the apricot and peach trees stood, crucified against the high wall in the sun. The place smelled drowsy with herbs and fruit, and the doves were crooning from the dove-house. At my feet a ripe apricot lay, velvet in the sun. I pushed it with my toe until it rolled over, and there, in the back of it, was a great rotten hole with wasps crawling. A shadow fell over it. My uncle stood above me, with an apricot in each hand. "I told you I had something better than windfalls,"
Here." He handed me one. "And if they beat you for stealing, they will have to beat me too." He grinned and bit into the fruit he held. I stood still, with the big bright apricot cupped in the palm of my hand. The garden was very hot and very still and quiet, except for the humming of insects. The fruit glowed like gold and smelt of sunshine and sweet juice. Its skin felt like the fur of a golden bee. I could feel my mouth watering. "What is it?" asked my uncle. He sounded edgy and impatient. The juice of his apricot was running down his chin. "Don't stand there staring at it, boy. Eat it. There's nothing wrong with it, is there?" I looked up. The blue eyes, fierce as a fox, stared down into mine. I held it out to him. "I don't want it. It's black inside. Look, you can see right through." He took his breath in sharply, as if to speak. The voices came from the other side of the wall, the gardeners probably bringing the empty fruit baskets down, ready for morning. My uncle, stooping, snatched the fruit from my hand and threw it from him, hard against the wall. It burst in a golden splash of flesh against the brick, and the juice ran down. A wasp, disturbed from a tree, droned past between us. Camlac flapped at it with a queer, abrupt gesture, and said to me in a voice that was suddenly all venom, "Keep away from me after this, you devil's brat! Do you hear? Just keep away!" He dashed the back of his hand across his mouth and went from me in long strides towards the house. I stood where I was, watching the juice of the apricot trickle down the hot wall. A wasp alighted on it and crawled stickily, then suddenly fell, buzzing on its back to the ground. Its body jackknifed, the buzz rose to a whine as it struggled. Then it lay still. I hardly saw it, because something had swelled in my throat till I thought I would choke, and the golden evening swam brilliant into tears. This was the first time in my life that I remember weeping. The gardeners were coming down past the roses, with baskets on their heads. I turned and ran out of the garden.